Welcome to the new Chemist. We're glad you're listening. Feel free to download this podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a variety of other platforms. On the new Chemist podcast, we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as community, research, COVID-19, and careers. We're glad you're listening. My guest today is Sebastian Kahf, a medical student in the medical partnership between Augusta University and University of Georgia. He's a hardworking, industrious young man and has been a colleague and friend of mine for several years from Georgia Tech. His research career spans a vast period of time, starting in 2015, continuing in 2016 at Morrow School of Medicine, to Parker H. Petit Institute for Bioengineering and Bioscience in 2017, and then on to Emory University School of Medicine in 2018 to 2019. Sebastian Kahf is a passionate young person and is really interested in science, research, and medicine. It is a joy to have him as a guest today on this podcast. Please welcome Sebastian Kahf.
Thanks, Sebastian, for joining me today. It's so good to hear from you. Dude, it's been a while. It's been a while since we spoke.
It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, the last time I remember when we took that, we took biochemistry 2 with Dr. Oyelere. Was it Dr. Oyelere?
Oh yeah.
And also we were in that sociology class, and I forgot in the public policy building. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think those are memories I have of our interactions, and those were good interactions. So Sebastian, getting started, what have been your long-standing interest in the field of science?
Well, for as long as I can remember, I've been interested in various elements of science, including neuroscience, behavioral science, evolution. Some of my studies being going into philosophy too, and in particular the philosophy of science. Basically, how can we continue to progress our fund of knowledge in an ethical and population conscious way while we fulfill our private and public incentives that drive that building that fund of knowledge. And medicine is also a great vehicle to try and do that with. So that kind of ended up combining what sort of my philosophical visions and sort of my interests in the hard sciences. So those are the sort of undercurrents of my undergraduate and graduate research.
Okay, good. So I have a question for you. How did you figure out what you were interested in? I think that's a lot of people's concern. I've spoken to a number of my friends and colleagues, and I dare say some of my colleagues in graduate school who are still trying to figure out their interests. Mm-hmm. So how did you decide on narrowing on your interests?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think, ironically, one of the best ways to do it is to experiment. Even if it's not science that you're necessarily interested in, experimenting with what's out there, seeing what you can getting exposed to as much as possible. I mean, funny story, when I started out at Georgia Tech, I was in mechanical engineering. I came in, had kind of, been inspired to pursue medicine for other reasons in my life, but never really considered it to be a possibility. But, I think I was sitting in my first mechanical engineering class and was told to draw my hand or draw, the Georgia Tech Tower and so on. And I realized that first, I'm a terrible artist.
That's fair.
And thinking about how we were going to get this 3D tool to be a part of manufacturing workflow. So I realized, let's take a look around here and look around and see what else is out there. Take a second look, started, looking into what is pharmacy like? What does a doctor do? Looked at some other careers too, but then started, shadowing some docs and all that. And that I got lucky early on in my career to kind of see that and say, oh, look, this is something that I could do. But I think primarily it's experiment. If I hadn't sat in that class, even pretty uncomfortable, and I stuck with it for a little bit, but I was pretty uncomfortable and realized, look, this is just not for me. Mm-hmm. But if you don't give something a fair shot, then you're also not doing it justice either. So, experimenting, giving things a good shot, and then putting it back on the bookshelf as soon as you're done, checking out a few chapters.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's very good. So how do you maintain view of the bigger picture in your career and in your life in general? How do you see the forest for the trees, given all the obstacles? You've been successful as a student. I think we can both agree on that. How do you maintain view of the bigger picture?
That's a great question. That's a topic I'm actually pretty passionate about. Your career is just one element of your life, or at least I hope it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your career can become a defining factor in your identity and how you shape a lot of your lifelong development and progression as a human being, right? Especially in careers like yours and my own, where a long period of education is a prerequisite, things like doctoral research or healthcare. It's really easy to get bogged down and lost in the long-term view, right? You have all this stuff to worry about, developing your professional relationships, so on and so forth. But life doesn't put itself on hold for you, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't slow down, your family, your friends, your relationships, your hobbies, your fitness, everything that's running in parallel to your professional journey becomes part of your balancing game. And I'm certainly no expert at this balancing game myself, but I found that, paradoxically, the more you invest into those other aspects of your life outside of your career, the more vitality you're able to bring to your professional life, right? The more of a person that you are when you walk into work every day and are able to engage with other people about things that matter, things that don't matter, everything in between, and have an enjoyable time. And so, yeah, I think keeping the bigger picture in mind is so critical, and the parts about it that I think are the most critical are just realizing what's actually important. Your career is important, but so is your health, and so is your family and your relationships. So I think those are the more time you put into those, the easier you're able to have a better perspective about your.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, man. And I think it depends on the person and the stage of life that you're at, because the big picture may look different for different people. So yeah, I think one of the ways we're able to get that helicopter view is to examine our values and to see how that's being shaped by the situation, or how they can conform or influence the situation. So how have you been adaptive and creative in the field of science?
Oh man, being flexible is definitely a key part in every field of science. As for example, I guess in research, you would know this better than I do. It's easy to get caught up in envisioning the perfect experiment and a perfect world where the controlled variables all sit in a line for you and give your data.
Yeah, I know, right? You're having an ice cream sundae experiment. Yeah, essentially.
Exactly. But you have all these real world variables that interfere with that vision, right? Time restrictions, regulation, responsibilities, institutional oversight, all that kind of stuff. But
experimental error as well.
Sorry?
Experimental error as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Things don't always go to plan. But there was this one project which I'm actually doing right now, and it's while I'm thinking of it, one of my projects, I joined this orthopedic trauma research group, and we were running a project on pain medicine, and we're getting all this data from a bunch of different countries on this protocol that I helped develop. But I was sitting in one of my other rotations one day and thinking, man, I'm going up to this clinic for 6 weeks. What if there was a way to compare the population that's at this clinic up in North Georgia to this other big, large academic medical centers? And so I reached out to the doctor that was running this clinic up here. I reached out to my team. I reached out to my institution, and basically we set it up so that we could do this project up here, while I was doing my rotation up here. And so while I'm living up here, getting to do a research project that I'm passionate about, that's, at all these, big shot academic institutions, and just do it in a totally different setting, just kind of speaks to, always looking for opportunities to be flexible. You don't have much time as a student, and how do you make that time valuable, and how do you make that time good for you and your career? So I've tried to keep on the lookout for those sorts of things, and you just never know who might be willing to help you out with what you have in mind, because for the most part your ideas are probably pretty good, and so ask around and people will point you in the right direction.
I agree. So how did you find the right environment for you to thrive scientifically and intellectually? How did you find that? How did you find Georgia Tech? How did you find MCG, Medical College of Georgia?
Well, I think there's a lot of different environments I could reference, but I think I'm going to take a different approach to this question.
Sure.
I think I could talk about how I chose a medical school, or chose an undergraduate college, or chose a research team, or how I'm going about choosing a specialty in medicine. But I think the most critical environment that we're asked to choose is our people, our friends, because I think it's vitally important to, examine which relationships are pushing you in the right direction, maybe pushing you to achieve what you previously maybe thought was a pipe dream, or something that was like just an afterthought of, oh man, it would be cool if I could do that. But, it's just, I don't want to do all the things that would require and take of me, and all the things I would have to sacrifice to get there. But finding the people that believe in you, and they're also on a constant path of defining their own purpose, and who you can share that journey with, I think that's the environment you want. And I don't think that those people have to necessarily be doing the same thing, or that they're doing, similar things even. I think when they have their own journey that you can engage in and kind of escape from your own little world, and share your wisdom with each other, I think that's the environment that can help and kind of apply to everyone. So I've tried to put a lot of healthy effort into cherishing those relationships that I have outside of my intellectual or my academic ones, because I keep coming back and finding that those are the ones that are able to let me thrive.
Wow, that's deep. That's deep, dude. That's very deep. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this episode just to hear that snippet. But how do you maintain a balanced life given all your responsibilities and accomplishments? So are you in an MD you are an MD or MD PhD?
I'm in an MD. I'm just an MD program.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So how do you maintain view of the bigger picture? Not bigger picture. How do you maintain a balanced life, rather, given all your responsibilities and accomplishments?
I run away from all my responsibilities.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
No,
That's how you
no,
deal
I mean
with it.
that, and I mean that literally. I mean that literally. No, I mean that literally. I think running and striving for some level of fitness and has kept me actually sane throughout all these years. I think.
Trust me, I joined the club.
Yeah, right. I mean, isn't it just such a good way to get away from everything that you're doing? I love racing. I love competing. I love setting new milestones, all that stuff. And actually, the funny story, I at some point was super ambitious and decided to join, the Georgia Tech Triathlon Club, which, I thought it would be a new way for me to try all these different sports and all this stuff.
Okay.
I realized I got myself a nice road bike, got myself some sleek triathlon shorts. But I realized after doing laps in the pool for hours and riding 20, 30, 40 miles that I hated that, and all I liked was the running. Yeah. All it made me realize was that I just like running more. So that was a fun journey, but in all seriousness, I think having that escape. I mean, we've already talked about having a life outside of your career and all that kind of stuff, but just having a physical way to show that you're improving yourself and having a good time while doing it. I think that's a great way to stay balanced.
Yeah, man. And also, I was reading something from the Harvard Business Review, and one of the things that can help is having response-oriented thinking, in which you consider the features of the situation that you can improve, the positive impact that you can personally have, can you contain any negatives of the situation, and what can I do to begin addressing the problem now? So things like that, I think they help you to maintain balance or keep things under control for as best as possible.
Yeah, how do you try to maintain a
Oh yeah,
balance?
dude, okay. Let's put the question on me. Let's go. So, how do I maintain balance, dude? It's sometimes it's a challenge. Sometimes it's a challenge. I'll be honest with you. I echo the sentiments of one of my former podcast guests. I have balanced days and balanced moments.
For sure.
He made the statement that he tries to keep the fluctuations. If you think of your life like a sinusoidal wave, he tries to keep the fluctuations, so the amplitude and the trough, the crest and the trough, within a specific bound. So they fluctuate to a certain extent. So yeah, you have your highs and your lows, days where you're very balanced, when you're not as balanced, but it's all within a specific boundary. And I think the boundary probably be your core values and priorities for that specific instance. So
that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, that's how I try to do it. But I'll do some days I'm not as balanced as I need to be. And that's the honest truth. So how have you been so successful as a student?
Well, I mean, so far so good.
Yeah, man, I would say so.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of my colleagues, I think there's a certain amount of dedication that we put into this part of your life, and you educate yourself so that you can have a career that's impactful and has intellectual stimulation and all that good stuff that we're seeking, as people in science. But I also think keeping the long-term vision. I mean, we earlier talked about how the long-term vision isn't everything, but at the same time, we also just talked about balance and how this educative period is not forever, right? It's a temporary thing, and we make a lot of sacrifices to be successful students.
Oh yes.
I could go into that whole topic, for hours, right, about how many years we spend doing this and all that. But we also understand that those sacrifices are not forever.
Yeah.
They're not permanent.
Yes.
And that you get out of your training what you put into it. So getting most out of it while you can turn it into an enjoyable challenge. Because I think the more we enjoy what we do, success kind of comes along secondary to that, right? You don't get success and then enjoy that. I think that's often the paradigm that's proposed to people, is that once you're successful, then you'll finally be happy. But if you can sort of flip that on its head, figure out what's making you happy, what's driving you, and then the success kind of comes along as it reveals itself to you once you figured out your formula.
Yeah, that's true. And I think at the end of the day, we have to take 100% responsibility for where we are and what has happened, as much as possible for the most part in our lives. And also we have to take ownership of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, because I think that allows us to direct, influence, change, and start to counteract whatever is occurring in our environment. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Sebastian, on that. Completely agree with you. And yeah, me too. We could go have a long conversation about sacrifices that we have had to give, like parties we didn't go to, friends we couldn't hang out with, all those types of things. But yes, I think of course that too requires balance as well, because like certain things I won't sacrifice for academic prestige, or articulated prestige, like my family and things like that, my faith, things like that. I'm not going to sacrifice those things because those are priorities. Those are part of my core values. My personhood is tied to those things. So, yeah. So, how have you maintained vision and teamwork in your environment?
I mean, teamwork is obviously everything, especially in a field like healthcare. I'm humbled every single day that I work with my colleagues in all parts of science, whether they're the nurse that's making sure that dozens of people get their medication at the exact right time, which is an extreme challenge, to the statistician who's helping us crunch numbers day after day after day to make our data somewhat presentable, right? And then the person that's cooking to ensure everyone that in the hospital has something to eat. I mean, I could go on forever listing all the roles that people play. And, I think maintaining that vision kind of comes back to thinking about what everyone is doing and waking up every single day to get behind and come and do for everyone that's there. I think just empathizing with what people do. I mean, I think it would be great if everyone could spend a day, at least a day, if not more, in someone else's shoes. I mean, you always hear the paradigm that, you know, the doctors always think the nurses are just hanging out and putting in, you know, all these orders, and then the nurses think the doctors are just sitting around and behind a computer and doing all this stuff. But and you can give a lot of examples of that, but you know, once we realize how much work is going on in someone's daily life, you start to see how much brain power goes into, you know, a single patient. It's pretty remarkable, and power as well. So yeah, just maintaining, you know, that empathy for everyone that's there to help serve people, and kind of helps you stay humble.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, humility is important. Like, I've heard a lot of people. I was listening to a message actually today, and this is from my faith perspective on humility. And he spoke about how humility. He mentioned how humility is almost like the father, the figurative father of promotion. Especially in the Christian faith, that's one of the things that they discuss. And also, one of the things you can do is be strategic with your humility, looking for ways to serve other people, and to make to not emphasize or inflate your self-importance. So yeah, that's good. So why did you choose medicine as a field to do your doctoral studies in? Why medicine? I'm sure you've got this question lots of times. So.
Yeah, and the answer is different every time. But, you know, medicine is just such a broad field. There's so much opportunity. There's so much to learn. There's so much to do. There's so many opportunities, you know, big and small, to make a difference in someone's day. I mean, you walk into a patient's room, and your conversation can go one of many ways. But if you look at that as an opportunity to, you know, have a great conversation, learn something about someone, make someone feel good about whether it's their lab values or their diagnosis or their treatment plan, or, you know, whatever it is, you know, in just one day in a clinic or a hospital, you interface with so many patients, families, people on your team. You can make someone's, you know, hospital stay a lot better by just sticking around, show that you're listening, show that you're happy to keep talking to them. And that's a really cool privilege. I mean, you're granted a lot of opportunity every day to make that, you know, difficult time a better one, or make that operation a smoother one. And you have a chance to make sure everyone walks in the next day excited to work with you, right? I mean, that's another big part of it, making sure that everyone's taken care of. So, you know, also, to be frank, I'm a bit of a nerd. I mean, I used to compete in Quiz Bowl and all sorts of academic competitions in high school, and
same here.
On television and all that stuff. And I mean, I used to study for fun, so I figured that same energy may come handy in a career like this.
Yeah, dude, there's nothing wrong with that. That's good. That's good. That's a good, healthy way to have fun. So I did the exact same thing. We back home in the Bahamas, the competition was called Ball of the Brains. Dude, we studied hard for the competition. Yeah, and we did well. Yeah. So as we conclude, what specifically are you leaning towards for your residency or your specialty?
Yeah, so right now, if I had to tell you today, it would be anesthesiology.
Okay.
That's sort of what I'm thinking about going into, potentially pain after that, but that's, you know, another decision for a later date. But
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking about right now. It's a really nice mix of, you know, real-time medicine. You're constantly thinking on your feet, you know, coming up with anesthetic plans or managing people before, during, and after surgery. You get to work with your hands a lot. You get to, you know, do a lot of things. A lot of people don't know what the anesthesiologist does. Everyone has the idea that but that they sit in the room and read a newspaper and just hang out. But there's quite a lot going on, and got a little bit of exposure to that, and got to see what that's like, and kind of fell in love with it as soon as I got to spend time, you know, helping out with that. So that's the current trajectory, but much TBD as we continue to progress through med school.
The story will unfold. Story will unfold. So yeah, man. Do you have any advice? Do you have any advice to those wanting to pursue the field you're currently working in or studying in?
I would say just try to get exposed to as much as you can. I mean, if you're just dipping your feet into medicine and think you want to do one thing, check out another thing, and then add another thing after that, and then another thing after that. Check out as many different specialties as you can. See what it's like to work in a hospital or in a clinic. Get as much of a feel as you can, whether you're a pre-med or a first year or second year medical student. Reach out to people. Only if 20% of them respond, you still are going to have a lot of people that are willing to show you what their career is like. Just see what's out there. There's so much variety, even down to the minutia. I mean, when you think about, one cardiologist day, may look so different than another one's day, whether they're talking to a National Medical Association with a bunch of lawyers, or they're working in an office, or they're in a cath lab all day. There's so much variation and opportunity out there. I think in medicine, we often think, okay, well, you're going to go to med school and you're going to graduate, and then you're going to go to residency, and then you're going to get a job, and then that's it for the rest of your life. But there's so many different ways to practice. There's so many opportunities that exist or are waiting for you to create. You might realize if you take a step back and that there's so much freedom out there for how you can practice and live your career out.
Wow, that's good. So what is the most beneficial advice you have received as we conclude? What is the most beneficial advice you have received, Sebastian?
That is a good question. I've received a lot of advice, a lot of it from myself, which is the same advice that I never listen to. No, but I mean, this is actually something that I heard one day. It's actually stuck with me for a long time. It's pretty unconventional, but one day it must have been back in college, or like on a college break, where I was at home. I was walking through my mother's living room, and there was some talk show playing. They must have been talking about some diet or exercise program. I don't really know, but this is a bit out of context, but the guest said something along the lines of, the more you do, the more you do. And I think that's so true for every part of life. I think that, the more responsibility you give yourself, the more objectives that you have and that you give yourself, the more room you'll make for them. And the more things that you'll learn, people you encounter. I think, I kind of, maybe you could liken it to, when you have a really big empty room in a house that hasn't been filled with furniture yet. I think as you start to fill up that room with furniture, you realize, wow, this room is like way bigger than I thought it was. It's like, wow, so much is fitting in here, and I can put stuff on the floor, I can put stuff on the wall, on the table, underneath in the closet, wherever. And you realize that there's so much more space from there than you thought. You just had to make it fit. And then that negative space in that room actually becomes a lot more intentional, right? Of course, we need rest, and we need a leisure time and all that stuff. But I think that also becomes a lot more valuable when you just have given yourself more things to do and challenge yourself with. So I think, that's a great quote that for some reason has stuck with me. I don't know why. I mean, probably the only talk show thing I've ever remembered, but it's a good way to view it.
Yeah, that's good. But Sebastian, thank you so much for joining me today. It was good to have you on as a guest.
Thanks for listening. We're glad you were able to tune into this podcast. Once again, this is The New Chemist, where we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as the other sciences, careers, community, research, and COVID-19. Thanks again for listening. Note, the views on this podcast represent those of my guests and I.